Well, with me, Chris Robertshaw, and we are going to be talking about events that have been happening in the House of Keys.
Yesterday,
on Tuesday. Yeah, we're recording this the day after. I thought it was worth getting you in quickly, because I know you sat through the whole thing in person. I was listening to the whole thing. It's different when you see it. It's what's going on. In fact, was the Chief Minister, thinking about what he was doing, and was he sort of making amends? At the end, he said he was sorry if people hadn't gone with him on this thing. Do you think he kind of did that?
Well, what is this thing that they all want the Chief Minister to go with? I attended because I think it was a particularly important moment in the life of our political system. I would, taking it away from the personalities, I would suggest that it was something of a breakdown, a political breakdown in arriving at a situation where there was a call for the resignation of or confidence in the Chief Minister. I mean, what was it all about? So I wanted to attend because I really wanted to listen to the whole feel of the day, and it was a sensible debate, and the offerings made. Generally, there were exceptions, I think. There was a really serious undercurrent about, this is a very serious thing we're looking at. But one of the strange things that I thought came out of it, listening to one or two of the members, was, the Chief Minister isn't taking us all into account, and I thought, well, is that what politics is all about? Is it all about being a cosy little group of 24 people, or is it 24 people really trying to find their way through some really deep and difficult issues, like the impact of demographic changes, which are huge, the cost of healthcare, the enormous size of government, where are tax policies going in relation to all of these things, and not least of which, of course, is climate change and the energy policy. So they're all in there, and and yet we don't really hear the members talk about those things. They come in as constituency voted representatives, members, and they have their own particular agendas, and they produce the plan for government, if you like. But does that plan for government that they've all agreed to and all signed up to, does it actually deal with the things that we've just been talking about? And here I am talking about the things I've been talking about since 2014.
Well,
and they are still there.
Should that debate have happened then? Let's try that one.
The members have got to find a way of, rather than addressing the issue of, it's the Chief Minister's fault, they've got to start working out what's their fault. How are they going to deal with these big issues? How are they going to communicate them with the general public? Because they're not doing it as individual members. I heard a voice in there represented by 3, 4, maybe 5 people, but certainly 4, saying, we need these extra services and this extra expenditure, and by definition they're therefore talking about increased taxes, and we've already seen that process begin. But where will this take us? What does the future of the Isle of Man look like when it is, without question or doubt, based on the principle of being a jurisdiction with competitive taxation? That's the basis of it. I mean, I've been around an awful long time, and I remember the state of the Isle of Man as that competitive tax proposition came into being and created what wealth we have. Have we forgotten the basic principles? How many members stand up and say we've really got to reduce the size of government and we've got to push our expenditure into frontline services? You don't hear any of that. And so how is it, coming back to the specific point that we're discussing here, how is it that they expect the Chief Minister to deal with these issues when they themselves will not face up to it, talk about it, or deal with it? because it's really hard stuff, and yet that's what they've got to do. Was it wrong for the Chief Minister to get to the point where he saw the budget for health exploding yet again to say, enough, we've got to deal with this? In my book, I translated that as the Chief Minister saying, enough is enough, we've got to tackle with the big issues. Were the members talking about the big issues? No. They wanted to be involved in something, cosy,
back to my
cosy and
question.
comfortable.
Should that have was there a need for this thing? And I mean, Tim Glover says he got a kicking from it. He thinks it might have damaged his future. I don't know how much you mean by that, but this came about. It's unusual. In fact, it hasn't happened before, has it? There hasn't been this sort of vote of no confidence. Just to get there and have, I don't know, how many hours of people giving their views on things.
Here, yes, good question. I mean, we had a situation where an underlying growing crisis for the future well-being of the Isle of Man was translated into a personal issue between the members and the Chief Minister. And so I think what it actually did was highlight the issues that the House of Keys as a whole is failing to address. And so in that respect it was something of a catharsis, I hope. The right result came about, that no, this is not a vote of confidence a loss of confidence in the Chief Minister. We must be grown up and get on with the job. Mm-hmm. Now they have to address, well, what is that job? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Not however, one must respect the individual's agendas of individual members. It's the collective issue of how do we deal with a massive situation where the cost of the healthcare is running out of control. The demands of my generation for healthcare are growing and creating further burdens on the younger generations. We've got a situation where the size of government just keeps getting bigger and none of them are talking about it particularly or doing anything about it. This
thing yesterday wasn't anything to do with that. Surely I'm just trying to focus you more. I think it was down to, do you, them, believe in Alf Cannan being the leader of that ship. That's what the actual debate was about. I mean, you can make it sound bigger to say the whole Council of Ministers, and that was, maybe the phrasing was wrong with the actual question, but the actual thing yesterday was about Alf Cannan's leadership, wasn't it? And everyone had their say about things, but they were voting on that, yay or nay, weren't they? If they had confidence in him.
Well, isn't it strange? And this is where you and I disagree. They were voting in whether or not they had confidence in the Chief Minister. But the question is, would any Chief Minister currently, whoever that person was, be capable of having confidence in the ability of the House of Keys to deal with the big issues? And the answer is no. Yeah. So I would argue that anybody currently in the chief role, the first among equals issue, is in a completely impossible position. And so they were actually expressing, and this is really, you'd think this is really a peculiar thing to say, they were actually expressing a lack of confidence in themselves.
Okay, yeah.
And therefore our system, and our structure. And I started talking about this in 2014, and I've talked about it since, and yet we still drift on.
Right. Who had an interesting speech for you yesterday? Who stood out for yay or nay?
Yay or nay?
Give the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yay or nay? What about the confidence?
Well, for him or against him? Which people talking yesterday, because you were there, stood out?
Well, none of them really, because none of the speeches dealt with the fundamental issues that House is responsible for fixing. We got sensible expressions of seriousness about, the issue of confidence. A vote of confidence in the Chief Minister is a really important issue, and we need to know where we're going if we're going to vote against him. But they don't know where they're going now because they haven't faced up to the issues.
Okay. Well,
we did get some worrying expressions of opinion in contributions from people like Johnny Farragher, Sarah Maltby, and to some extent Hooper as well, because they were happily saying, oh, well, we can, by, at least this is my interpretation, by increasing taxation. And yet that's completely removed from the issue of, well, what are the cornerstones of the well-being of our economy? So, there were no really outstanding.
Okay, let's talk about Mr. Hooper's one. I mean, he kind of triggered this whole thing, I suppose, by staying down. What I heard was it was nothing to do with him at all. Nothing was his fault at all. He's just left it now, and he was doing a great job. Well, many people don't agree with what that's. I mean, what do you think?
Well, that clash was a manifestation of much deeper things, wasn't it? I mean, I don't want to get too involved in he said, she said stuff. What I'd much prefer to be concerned about is, okay, now we've got over the issue of a vote of no confidence in the Chief Minister. What is the House of Keys going to do about challenging the big issues and leading up to the next election? Is that what the next election is going to be about? Or are we going to default back to individual agendas?
Okay, but what do you think about Mr. Hooper standing down then to cause, and the way he talked the other day about the future of the health service and the future of the Isle of Man? But don't you think people have to take responsibility for some things in their tenure?
Yes, I do. But what you were dealing with there was removed from the individual he said, she said, was the issue of the Chief Minister has the view that I believe that he recognises the fact that being a competitive taxation jurisdiction is important, and therefore we've got to live within our means. And Laurie Hooper seems completely removed from it, as if somehow we can just drift on and keep increasing our costs and not find ways of dealing with the challenges that are before us, not least of which is the future of the National Insurance Fund, which is paying my pension now, but will it pay my sons and my grandchildren's pensions? And the answer is, well, on the current direction that we're going, the current trajectory, no, it won't.
And we've known about that forever. I was in interviews with you at the time, I think, talking about this whole thing 10 years ago.
Well, you make my point.
Yeah.
Have we moved forward from 10 years ago to address the fundamental issues? And the answer is no. So these are all manifestations of these undercurrent tensions.
Yeah.
It's easy to drift into personality criticism.
I want to.
I know you do. You love it.
No, because I thought, you've done that. You set all that out, and we can park that. You made your point very clear. But I'm trying to get to the point of, you watch these people. You were one of these people yourself only a few years ago. Therefore, I'm trying to get you to mark the cards. Who did a good presentation, who maybe wasn't up to it, or whatever. I mean, what do you think? For instance, Chris Thomas standing or potentially putting his head up above the parapet to say, I will be the Chief Minister if you want me to. And his speech yesterday, which was quite wandering in places, but, he's clearly got a message to put over, hasn't he?
Well, there's a conundrum in what you just said there. His speech was wandering, but he's got something to say. He said
it was about the Chief Minister, but he spoke a lot about himself, I thought, that's all, those sort of things.
Well, that did cause a bit of a giggle, didn't it? Did you hear that?
That's my point, because he said, this is actually not about you today, this is about the Chief Minister. But people have a habit of wanting to give their credentials and how wonderful they're all doing. But that necessarily wasn't the order of the day.
The fact of the matter is, the House of Keys, the elected representatives of the people as a whole, are not grasping the nettle. Right. And until such time as the House, remember, they are, as they said in their speeches, that they are a group of 24 individuals. They can't expect the Chief Minister to take the Isle of Man in the direction that it needs to go in and tackle the really hard issues unless the House of Keys understand what those issues are and are willing to face up to them. But they're not, are they? They want to hide in their comfortable personal little rabbit hole about what they believe in or not, and that somehow the big issues are somebody else's fault. And yesterday it was all about, well, the big issues are the Chief Minister's fault, and how can he possibly put us in a position where we're really challenging the healthcare budget. Well, what choice had the Chief Minister got than to do what he did? He either let it drift on, or he tried to deal with it and to challenge that massive issue. Because once you start addressing, well, what are we going to do? The challenges get bigger and bigger.
Mr. Hooper, of course, blamed the chief for a lot of, well, council ministers in general, I suppose, but he was obviously getting it thick and fast yesterday.
Who was?
Mr. Hooper to the chief, I mean, I no?
Well, yes. Laurie Hooper was defending his own personal position, and I'm determined not to be dragged down that rabbit hole because it's incidental to the big picture.
I'll try another line.
Go on.
What about what 3 ministers said? If he goes, we go. What was your thoughts on that? Because some people really reacted angrily to that, like almost blackmail, and others could understand. And that was quite something to say. We'll fall on our swords at the same time and won't stand again. Which that was.
Well, I think all right. On the face of it, I would say that if I was in their shoes, I would have done the same thing. Okay, that's number one. But number two is the Council of Ministers itself. All those individuals, are they actually addressing the issues that we face? And they're huge, and the answer is no. So it's sort of, it's an unwillingness on the part of our elected representatives to be grown up and to face up to the big issues.
Any surprises on the way the voting was? It was 6, wasn't it, in favour of the motion?
Well, I oscillated as I was listening to it from anything as low as 3 up to as anything as high. I don't know what you did.
I know. Well, at one stage I thought he wasn't going to get second, although I knew Mr. Thomas had done it. But it seemed at the beginning, particularly, was not going Mr. Glover's way. But then there were those shifts, but there's some surprises, right, as well. I mean, I'm thinking Mr. Collister, he actually didn't. I mean, he talked a lot about how things had been in the past, but I don't think he put his name to that in the end, did he? I can't remember.
Did he vote for the motion of no confidence? No, he didn't.
I thought he didn't. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
No, he didn't.
There's quite a few surprises in there because some people you think, well, this is their chance to have their vendetta. Well, I mean, resolved a bit, or at least aired.
Well, one of the things, for example, that was said against the Chief Minister was that that he's seen a lot of changes in his ministerial system, and that somehow that was a criticism. I would put it somewhat differently. I would put it that the Chief Minister was trying to take the Isle of Man in a particular direction, but unable to take the Council of Ministers with him, and finding it extremely difficult to take the House of Keys with him. And so they're acting at the moment like a bunch of lost souls, really. I mean, it's rather it's worrying. Is
it 5 ministers that have changed in this time? And he's only had one reshuffle, wasn't it? Mini reshuffle, and that was Julie Edges.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
4 or 5.
The actual reshuffle was only one person that time.
Yeah. So the only time you can express criticism in the current regime for not grasping the nettle on these issues, but those who criticise the lack of direction have not come up with anything remotely like an adequate alternative. And so, by all means get lost in personality, but let's stay with the big issues.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up then. I mean, what sort of debate do you think it was? It's happened, it's finished.
It was a catharsis. It dealt with, I think, quite well. It dealt with individual expressions of frustration, but it didn't, sorry, this is a cliche, but it didn't deal with the elephants in the room. I mean, that's an awful cliche, but they're there and they're screaming at us, and unless they grow up and deal with them, we're going to sort of blunder on. And the Chief Minister cannot do it on his own. He has to have a Council of Ministers that recognise the big issues and say, however hard they are and however difficult it is to deal with them, we are going to grasp them. And the House of Keys has then itself got to grow up and deal with them. Otherwise, the whole lot of them will have let the electorate down massively.
Well, we've got 2 odd years to go. Obviously, Jersey Guernsey did have a change in their Chief Ministers, which was pointed out But that's a different way. They've got more people to do that with. I mean, do you think, and I think where we started here, the Chief Minister has learned anything from yesterday? Has he taken away anything? Will he have a different style from now on? Or does he need to? Different style of how he governs, or does he need to even? I mean, as it's pointed out by many people, he's just the chief of the ministers. You know, it's still collective decisions being made in COVID, isn't it? He's just the leader of the pack.
He clearly listened and responded in a pretty modest way. If the whole issue was about style, and he changed his style, and we just drifted on in the direction they were going, then nothing much would have been achieved. But I hope the question that we're left with after a long debate in the House of Keys, which lasted the whole of the day, which was serious, was, is there yet an understanding of what's really going on here? And are they going to start dealing with them? There's
been a perception that this has been the worst government. I think we get that every time. Every government is always going to be the worst one. But we are living in very difficult times, aren't we not?
We are. I mean, the issues that this House is not dealing with, let's be fair, were not dealt with by the previous administration, and really not by the administration before that.
Which you were in.
Yeah. Well, I did try, and I failed. But why does it get more and more worrying? It's because we're getting further and further, or closer and closer, as it were, to the precipice. We've lived a lie now for I don't know how many years, ever since the loss of the VAT income occurred, and we struggled at that time to recover as much of that 200 million as we possibly could. But ever since then, we've carried on eating into the reserves, and I think it's a fair phrase, living a sort of lie. Now is the time to face up to it, and why one would say, I think, that this administration is the worst yet, is that the fear is growing in us all that we're getting closer and closer to the edge and are not dealing with it.
And on that, I mean, he's rolled it out every time he's had difficulties, but he started with this great thing about the SAVE programme. Yes, we were going to save by cutting things back, and we're still talking about this, and it's still nothing of any note has been saved, has it, really?
No, because the politicians themselves as a whole aren't strong enough.
Because the civil servants are still running the shop, or what?
Yeah, because it's not in the interest of a civil servant to say, "Oh, well, let's cut the size of my department. Let's redefine its roles. Let's find out how we can make the whole operation."
So we're still in trouble, then, aren't we? I mean, that's the trouble with the whole thing.
Yeah,
everyone's feeling the same thing. You know, there's this feeling
we're just going around in circles.
That we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, and almost anybody thinking head now understands that, but it's not translating into a narrative that can then convert into a delivery.
So can he take control over those civil servants and run the government properly? I mean,
not without a council of ministers that are willing to recognise the difficulties.
But when you've got these strong civil servants, you know, these gatekeepers and others, I'm sure, who just appear to be in charge, this is tricky, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that the leadership in the civil service is particularly strong at all.
Oh.
I think it manifests weaknesses. Unfortunately, it's dealing with weak politicians. And so we're blundering on. You know, I think the worst job in the world right now is the Chief Minister's role.
Okay, let's finish on this one. Do you think, moving on to the next election, do you think Alf will stand for that position again?
I don't know.
What do you think? Have you got any feeling on it?
I don't know.
Do you see Chris Thomas as a leader, or unknowns yet to come in? Of course, you never know. But normally, it's someone's already done a term, isn't it? Do you see a future Chief Minister in the current pack?
No.
Wow.
No, because I don't see a purposeful sense of direction, which has to be now courageous if we're going to get out of the situation we're in. Do we drift into insignificance and slow reduction in standard of living?
And less reserves, or no reserves.
And no reserves, and ever greater exposure to future turbulence? Or do we grip the issue we're in?
So depressing, this, you know. We do this so many times, and I would always like to think we're going to have some light at the end of the tunnel, but still the same problems persist.
Well, while we have a system that elects people on the basis of their personality within the constituency, and not the bigger issues, not the big platform issues that people need to take a position on, then we're sort of lost. But don't let those who say to you that, oh, the answer is party politics, it's not party politics.
And we keep another question, but do you think voting for the Chief Minister, i.e. the whole Isle of Man, has a chance if there's such a system that can be worked out? Do you think that would be a good idea, that the Isle of Man population has an input into a Chief Minister?
I would have refuted that absolutely a few years ago and said no, but I think the situation now is becoming really serious, and really serious situations require really serious responses, and we've got to get to a situation where the overall will of the people of the Isle of Man is expressed in the political process, and right now it's not working. It may perhaps work for the individual, as one hopes it will, for the individual constituent and the individual MHK, but in the sense of major serious debate and where does the future take us, we haven't got that ability at the moment, and so we see what we saw yesterday, which was a house struggling with itself.